Hi, I'm Rick Harsch, and I'm the publisher of Corona Samizdat, and I'm doing my first booktube of our first book. Actually, there are two at the beginning, but I'm going to start with this one, Walk Like a Duck, a season of Little League Baseball in Italy. It's a book about baseball in Italy, a Little League season. I had just finished a 4-month job and had some free time, and I decided I love watching Little League Baseball more than anything in the world here, in Italy. I'm not in Italy, but I'm very close to Italy. And my son played in Italy, and it's a 646 page journal, basically, about baseball. But it's also about various other things. I covered the history of the area, whatever I think of on that day. There's even a book review of a book of poetry by Seshu Foster in here, um, and a lot of different things. I cover professional baseball whenever I feel like commenting on it. In fact, I think one of the best baseball sections of the book is uh, the story of bunting, because it's not only an underappreciated art, but the story of bunting in the major leagues is quite interesting, and it leads to the necessity of writing about the one baseball player who was killed during an actual Major League Baseball game. There's been only one. His name was Ray Chapman, and turns out he was a great bunter, and might have been the greatest of all time, but his career was cut short. Um, they used one ball per game back then if they could, and it was dirty, and they played without lights. It was dark. The gloaming, it was in the gloaming, and they say he probably never saw the pitch coming because he didn't move to get out of the way, and when it hit his head, it sounded like it hit a bat. Imagine that. So the pitcher, saw where the ball went, fielded it, and threw to first, while the batter just slowly crumbled and crumpled and ended up in the hospital and died that night. Um, it's a great story, and there's a lot more to that, or I wouldn't have told you that much. Um, I have several things that I need to get out of the way first. The main one, I even wrote stuff down for this. I don't know. Some people don't seem to write anything down. I don't know how they do that. But mine is, do you have to love or know baseball to enjoy this book? Well, on Goodreads, there are two reviews, one by a baseball lover, and that's the number one review. That guy compared me to the best baseball writers ever, and I didn't pay him to do that. And the other is by a guy who doesn't know anything about baseball, and he loved it. But the, that doesn't mean that if you hate baseball, that you should buy the book. You shouldn't. If you hate baseball, because it's baseball, baseball, baseball. It describes a lot about the game, and if you hate baseball, you're just not going to enjoy it. Um, you're going to be irritated constantly, like, when are we going to get to something that's not baseball? And the answer to that is soon, always. But, I'm talking about every single game during a season in northeastern Italy. And so, there's just too much baseball in there if you really don't like the game. If you don't care one way or the other, well, there's enough humane stuff. There's a lot about kids and so on. In fact, I would say that, I have to look at a different note here. There are two main themes in the book. Um, One of them is how parents fuck up their kids. And yeah, any of you can imagine that, whether you've had kids or not, but things that you've heard about the way parents behave, uh, so there's a lot about that, um, or enough about that to, I think, cohere into a main theme. Um, my kid came out all right. I didn't fuck him up. In fact, I'll tell you one thing good about my son, that is just a natural thing. I wasn't that way when I was a kid. I was a little maniac. When something bad happened in a game, like let's say he's batting, he's got 3 balls and 2 strikes, and ball 4 comes in, but the umpire calls it a strike, he'd just go back to the dugout with his bat. He wouldn't be upset. Later I'd ask him, "Were you upset?" He said, "A little bit." So he rarely he wouldn't show if he was upset, but he was rarely even upset. That's the way things go. The other main theme of the book is anti-fascism, and the reason for that is a longer one. This is the region that hatched fascism. Trieste. I live about 15 to 20 minutes from Trieste, and my son's best friend on the team lives in Trieste. So we always went together, and the main route to their house took me past the only gas chamber from World War II in Italy, which was in Trieste. And so Risiera di San Saba, I would pass that all the time. And at first I didn't know what it was, but when I looked it up, I thought, I know it's around here somewhere. And I realized it was that one brick building that I would see all the time when I turned off the main highway down into the southern part of Trieste. So Trieste was was the place that it's surrounded by Slovenes. It was an international city, and I think that Italians should have gotten Trieste because it was a major Italian city, and the probably slight majority of the people who lived there were Italian, but they certainly weren't Slovenes. There were a lot of Slovenes, and the surrounding territory was Slovene. But the city itself, suffice it to say that one thing that the case that I make in the book is that because I trace the history of fascism, because so many fascist monuments, are all around there, and there's a lot of funny stuff about World War I and the early fascists. It's an ugly thing, and I do talk about the ugly things, but there are a lot of funny things too. But if Trieste would have gone to the Slovenes or to Yugoslavia, it would have been there would have been a Cold War that heated up now and then. So best that you give it to the fascists. Fuck them. Anyway, Slovenia did get screwed with Gorizia, but that's neither here nor there. It is there, but it's not here. So the interesting things about the fun stuff about baseball is typical fun stuff about baseball. Errors at important moments, parents outraged, and parents, being bizarre. Umpires, one gigantic umpire who, after I made fun of him, and I don't speak Italian, but I picked up some baseball Italian, and I can count. And this guy, umpires fuck up, and parents have to keep their mouths shut when they fuck up, when little kids are playing. The umpires aren't trying to fuck up. They just do. It's part of the baseball game. And when it's an adult game, umpires are there to be screamed at by everybody. It's why they're there. Not so much to make decisions, but to make bad decisions so we can all swear at them. But when it's a kid's game, you try not to. But once in a while they do something that they should never do. Like they have little counters in their hands so they can count how many balls and strikes. And this big fat umpire twice in one game screwed up a number, and I asked somebody I ran into in the bathroom behind home plate, how do I say, something, I can't remember what it was. And so I said that, and then I started counting for him, in Italian, just to make sure he understood, that, you got to learn to count. And he went over to my son's team and the pitching coach and said, I didn't come here to be insulted. Well, yeah, but it didn't work out that way. Some of the fun things about World War I, you wonder what could be fun about that. Well, the Italians were on the side because of some, funny deals they made with the Allies that ended up fucking the Slovenes for decades. A sort of slow genocide that led to a compressed genocide during World War II. They actually talked about killing every Slovene. There's only 1 million, Mussolini's son-in-law told them, Giano. Anyway, they notoriously, if you've read Ernest Hemingway and Farewell to Arms, you know that the final battle between the dark powers and the Allies in the mountains behind Trieste. It's not actually that close to Trieste, but it's pretty close. We can see those mountains from here. They on a clear day, and they got the shit kicked out of them. They were driven all the way back to the Piave, where the Allies saved them, the British primarily, and the U.S. Americans. And so for them, they were on the winning side in the war, but their part in it was a complete disaster, a dark comedy of errors. And it all happened in the region where my son plays baseball. And so one of the things that Mussolini did is he built a lighthouse, giant lighthouse in Trieste, and it's called something about like Lighthouse for Victory or something like that. Can't remember, but I always called it because it's phallic. I always called it Cazzo di Cadorna, because Cadorna was the inept general who sent millions to their deaths and manglings, and Cazzo is cock. So Cazzo di Cadorna, and I've used that to a few nationalists, and enough to know that my theory about fascism in Italy is probably correct, that fascism still thrives underneath the surface. What the United States did was they helped the Italians defeat the communists in 1948, and they used a lot of old fascists and kept them in positions of power, and they called them Christian Democrats, and they were in power until, early 1990s, and not long after that you got Berlusconi, who's, a modern fascist. And so, no question. And so the fascism that was ushered in by Gabriele D'Annunzio and Mussolini is still there, and so there's a lot of fun stuff about that. But there are all kinds of monuments, and one is a monument to Anni di Piombo, the Years of Lead. That was the period where the left fought the government, and extreme rightists fought the left in order to create disorder, hoping to change the government and move it to the right even further, or openly to the right. And most of that happened in northern Italy at first, and one of the places where it happened, and I'll just give you this one example because we visited it. It's right in, it's 40 minutes from here probably, and we were going to Redipuglia, which is a place near one of the ugliest and most cement-filled monuments you'll ever see. It's just a bunch of stairs going up a mountain that was important during the war, and it's famous for being difficult to get up. So putting stairs there seems like a good idea, except anybody who fought in that battle would have said, where were the fucking stairs when we were fighting? Well, anyway, the Anni di Piombo, Years of Lead. Some far right people who in the Trieste area wanted to create an incident that they could blame on the left, and what they did was they loaded a little Fiat with a bomb, and the ingredients of the bomb, the core of the bomb, it was C4, and the only place that they could have gotten that was the only people who had it was NATO had it. So the U.S. had a secret cell here at the time, and they did throughout Western Europe. They had these cells, and this is all actually a historical fact. And I even know the name of the guy who got the C4 for a couple of the bombings, a guy named Carlo Di Giglio. We don't know who particularly in the U.S. gave it to him. But using U.S. C4 explosives, they rigged a car, and then they put bullet holes in it to make it look especially suspicious. And they parked it right by the Isonzo River, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And they made a call to the Carabinieri, and it's one of the police forces in Italy. And they said, hey, we got a suspicious car here. And 4 Carabinieri showed up, and when they opened the I think it was the hood, I think it was under there, it blew up and killed 3 of them. And of course, it was blamed on leftists, even though they knew the Carabinieri of the region, the regional boss out of Udine, which is a big city in the Northeast, big enough to have a football team. And they blamed it on the left, and then just kind of moved on. So there's and we visited that, and there's a photo in the book, and I made the mistake of not marking pages. So here's a picture though. That's an empty field and an ambulance during a very dramatic game against one of the 2 best teams. The team my son was on is called the Staranzano Ducks. Actually, the English Ducks, which it was always funny when they played a Slovene team called the Ducks, but in Slovene it's Razze. So the Italians, didn't want to use. I can't remember what their word is, something like that, anati or something. But anyway, they are called the Ducks. Staranzano is right by Monte. What's that? What's that city? What? Never mind.
Who are you talking to? I mean.
Yeah, no, I'm talking to you now. I was talking to the.
And so what's the question?
Monte. I'm having a dementia moment.
But what's in Italy?
Yeah,
Monfalcone?
Monfalcone is the most northern city, port city in the whole Mediterranean, and Monfalcone has these kind of, they're not really suburbs, but they're like villages that grew into each other. So Staranzano is one of those. Reggio Puglia is kind of one, and Ronchi is another. And it's called Ronchi di Legionari because that's where, when that crazy fucker D'Annunzio um, took his troops to take over Rijeka. If you don't know that story, look it up. It's madness. But they met at Ronchi. That was a staging ground for the attack on Rijeka, which at the time was called Fiume. And so he moved to the Staranzano Ducks, and in the year that I describe here, the Ducks and Ronchi were the two best teams, and there was a wild game that night, and it could have ended. The two best infielders on the team, Carlos at short, Carlos at second, Arjun at short, were going for the last out, and the Ducks had a one-run lead, and there was a ball hit right between them, and it was just unclear. It was best if Arjun could get it because he's moving towards first, but Carlos didn't know if Arjun could get it, and they collided, and Carlos ended up going to the hospital. It was a scary moment, and but we knew the umpire was a friendly umpire, friend of mine who's actually in the book, and a couple of times, picture of him and everything, came and said, nothing, But at that moment, there's a crowd on the field. The parents can't rush out there, and you got to leave it to the people on the field. And they called the ambulance and everything, and you got that lovely photo. But everybody was okay, and there you have what can happen in a baseball game. You can have a major looking injury and nothing happens. And actually, that's a lot of what's great about baseball is so little happens. There's moments of high drama and nothing really happens. Maybe once in a while an important run scores, people jump up and down. But if you love baseball, at all moments something's happening. It's like a chess game. You have to be wondering, okay, what's the score? What are they going to do? But it's also the beauty of the fielder making even a routine play can be a beautiful thing. The comedy is great. A ball is hit in the air, a nice easy one. 3 people can catch it, and so 3 people capable of catching it converge on it, but they make the mistake of not yelling. None of them take control and say, "I have it," and or one does and they don't hear them, so there's a collision. But the most fun is when they say, "I have it," and then the ball just hits the ground. It's a game of mistakes and of making people make mistakes, and that's one of the joys of the game. But I don't know. I've never done a YouTube this long before, and I'm not even sure if I can. So I might have to ask for help from one of my favorite YouTubers, booktubers, Noah. Noah of everyone who reads it must converse. I'll ask him, how do you take 25 minutes? And so I guess I have to end this one. It's a fun book, and I'll just do a little reading. There's a notorious fart that created a moment that back when I was a manager, and I discuss this in the book. It's a notorious fart, by a man named Gappo. And the thing is, he dragged the fart. He got up, he farted. He was on the end of the bench, and this was in the Slovene major leagues, about 2004. A lot of our players would come hungover and whatever, and Gappo was hungover, and he had the farts. So he sat on the end of the bench. But he farted, and it was a loud and stinky fart. But he stood up. We're all sitting on the bench, or everybody but me. I was the manager. And he dragged the fart, as I call it. He walked past everyone on the bench. I don't know where he was going. And I just started screaming at him, at least 10 minutes lecture on not dragging your farts. You can fart. If you have to fart, fart. But don't drag the fucking thing right in the faces of all the people there. Don't drag your farts. If you're going to read this book, that may be the most important thing you get out of it. Don't drag your farts. The little bit I want to read is the prologue, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it starts out with, this is a happy book written by a happy man. And then there's some stuff about the difference between a novel and how much more freedom you have writing about fact, because you can select. In a novel, it's not fact, but you create a situation which traps you into having to write what you've prepared to write. And if there's a fact, you can come at it from any angle and include as much context or as little as possible. Note, I didn't tell you that the team that I managed was the worst in Slovenia, because it wasn't. There was one team worse. It was also a new team, and they weren't much worse. But anyway, I talk about, let's see. Okay, there's more. General proximity to veins of history and culture, trappings of geography, and most genial of all, the myriad anecdotes that rise ghostly from the artificial alpine ravines of World War I, the literary vortex of Greater Trieste, the time of Turk and travail in the upper Adriatic's hinterland, World War II's failed genocide of Slovenes, James Joyce's habits of drink, Casanova's barber, and all the quirks of generations of post-World War II baseball folk of the region. And there is plain happy circumstance. And then I end it with, for I have already revealed what is most important. This is a happy book. Thank you. I'll make sure I figure out how to cut down on the time in the future. This for Corona Samizdat. This is Rick Harsch. Walk like a duck. Season of Major League Baseball in Italy. Highly recommended to all who don't hate baseball.